Today in Cannabis News, a federal cannabis legalization bill is finally introduced in the U.S. Congress, though perhaps not by who you might think. A bill to legalize medical cannabis statewide in Nebraska falls 2 votes short of defeating a filibuster, and in the midst of cannabis legalization waves in states throughout the U.S., a man in Mississippi faces a life sentence for simple possession. It's Friday, May 14th, and this is your TRICHOMES Morning Buzz.
Broadcasting live from the TRICHOMES.com studios in Southern California, it's time for your Morning Buzz. We bring you late-breaking news that keeps you up to date with what's happening in the cannabis industry.
First up, following weeks of teasing a forthcoming federal cannabis legalization bill by U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and a coalition of Democratic lawmakers, a bill has finally been introduced, though perhaps by not who you think. Republican Representatives David Joyce and Don Young are co-sponsoring the Common Sense Cannabis Reform for Veterans, Small Businesses, and Medical Professionals Act, which would federally legalize cannabis, safeguard financial institutions that serve state-authorized cannabis businesses, allow for interstate export and import, and guarantee that military veterans are expressly allowed to use cannabis in accordance with state statutes. The bill's primary objective is to deschedule cannabis at the federal level, which is akin to the previous bipartisan initiatives, but goes further with verbiage on requirements for federal medical cannabis research. Notably, it lacks social justice and equity clauses to address the previous and ongoing detriments of the war on drugs. The bill takes significant steps to modernize our laws by removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and allowing the VA to prescribe medical cannabis to veterans, in addition to finally permitting state legal cannabis businesses to utilize traditional financial services, said Representative Young. I call on my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to stand with us in this crucial effort.
And next up, KETV7 Omaha reports that a proposal to legalize medical cannabis in the state of Nebraska has failed to pass the state legislature, coming up 2 votes shy of breaking the filibuster, which required 33 votes. Since it didn't follow the state's single subject law, the Nebraska Supreme Court withdrew a voter initiative that would have required citizens to determine whether or not to legalize medical cannabis in December 2020. 196,000 signatures were gathered by organizers of the petition. State Senator Anna Wishart, who introduced LB 474, said proponents will now start a new petition drive to allow citizens to vote on the 2022 midterm ballot, noting that the ballot terminology would be a single sentence this time. People in the state of Nebraska have the right to medical cannabis for medical purposes, period, Wishart said. Wishart believes that it is preferable for politicians to discuss the problem rather than leaving it to the electorate. Some critics are concerned that if the debate goes to the electorate, it would succeed and open the possibility of recreational cannabis legalization. If we want to avert recreational marijuana, we're going to have to think about something very restrictive, or we will see it everywhere and it will be bad, said State Senator Mike Flood.
Last up, as additional states modernize their cannabis policies every election year, a reminder of the importance of cannabis policy reform in the U.S. and that no individual should be incarcerated for cannabis can be seen in the Mississippi State Court of Appeals, where Alan Russell, age 38, was sentenced to life in prison after being found in possession of approximately 1.5 ounces of cannabis. Medical cannabis legalization was passed in Mississippi in 2020, but recreational cannabis remains illegal in the state. In 2019, Russell received the sentence. Russell's attorney claimed on appeal that their life sentence constitutes cruel and unusual punishment that is grossly disproportionate. According to the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, in Mississippi, possession of between 30 and 250 grams is a felony punishable by a maximum of 3 years imprisonment and or a maximum fine of $3,000. However, if a person has already been convicted of a crime, the penalty may be significantly increased. In 2004, Russell was convicted of burglary and served over 8 years in prison. Russell was then found guilty of illegal possession of a weapon by a criminal in 2015 and sentenced to another 2 years in prison. In 2017, the cannabis possession arrest occurred. The Associated Press noted that in Mississippi, a person can be sentenced to life without parole after serving at least 1 year in prison on 2 separate felonies, one of which must be a violent offense. Russell has been ordered to serve the remainder of their life in prison because of something of which Mississippi residents would receive a 1-year sentence, and that Americans in numerous states may legally purchase. Russell's conviction was not cruel and unusual, ruled the Mississippi Court of Appeals, since it followed Mississippi statutes on habitual offenders. However, some judges disagree with the prevailing view.
And that was today's Buzz. Thanks for listening. For more cannabis news and insights from industry professionals and a place to discuss these stories and others, visit TRICHOMES.com.
And be sure to catch up with all of our other cannabis industry-related podcasts like Hash It Out, Careers in Cannabis, or the International Cannabis Conversation wherever you get your podcasts. For TRICHOMES.com, I'm Devin Liao.
And I'm David Fortin. Have a great weekend.